All right, let's jump right in. We're going to tackle a huge question today. What are the rules of war when the battlefield itself is invisible? When it's the internet? We're diving into the pretty wild world of cyber warfare and asking a really simple question. Can our old laws even begin to keep up?
So let me start by asking you this. Just imagine for a second that tomorrow your country's entire banking system just stops. A digital attack from a foreign power. No bombs, no soldiers, but the economy is totally paralyzed. Is that war? Your gut is probably screaming, yes. But legally, well, that's where things get really, really messy. And that uncertainty is exactly why we need to talk about this.
Okay, so let's break this down. We all throw around the term cyber warfare. I mean, it sounds so dramatic. You see it in spy movies all the time. But here's the scary part. When you ask what it actually means under international law, nobody really knows for sure. And that's really the heart of it, isn't it? We can all agree that a massive digital attack feels like war. But the real challenge is figuring out at what point a string of code becomes the legal equivalent of a missile. You know, when does a digital attack officially cross that line and justify a real military response? This brings us to the central problem. It's kind of like we're trying to apply rules written for cannons and cavalry to a battlefield made of code and fiber optic cables. These old laws were just never, ever designed to handle the kinds of weapons we have today. To get this, you gotta know about a concept called jus ad bellum. Now, don't worry about the Latin. The idea is super simple. Think of it like a is it okay to go to war checklist. It's a set of rules that countries are supposed to go through before they even think about launching an attack to make sure it's legally justified. And this is where you see the huge disconnect. The folks who wrote things like the Geneva Conventions, they were thinking about trenches and tanks and physical harm. The idea of a global computer network being a battlefield, I mean, it would have sounded like something out of a science fiction novel. So just look at the difference here. On one side, you have traditional or kinetic warfare. It's pretty obvious, right? There's physical damage, you know when a border's been crossed, and you can see the soldiers in uniforms. But cyber warfare? It's the total opposite. The damage is economic, the attacks can come from anywhere on Earth, and good luck figuring out who's actually behind the keyboard. So what happens when you have these ancient rules and these futuristic weapons? You get this giant legal gray zone. It's created a kind of global paralysis where everybody knows these attacks are happening, but nobody's quite sure what to call them or how they're legally allowed to respond. Now, the whole modern system that's supposed to prevent wars really boils down to two big ideas in the UN Charter. First, Article 2.4, which basically says, hey, you can't go around threatening or attacking other countries. Simple enough. And then there's Article 51, which says, but if someone hits you with an armed attack, you have the right to defend yourself. And this is the million-dollar question everything hinges on. Does a cyber attack fit into those old-school definitions? Is shutting down another country's power grid a use of force? Is stealing all their government secrets an armed attack? So far, the world's collective legal answer has pretty much been a shrug. Which brings us to this number, 0. That is exactly how many times any country on the planet has officially declared a cyber attack an armed attack under the UN Charter, the kind of attack that would give them the right to use military force in self-defense. Not once. Ever. As one analysis puts it, no state has ever claimed that any cyber attack establishes an armed attack giving rise to a right of self-defense. I mean, just think about that for a second. We've had years of escalating digital attacks, but no one, not one country, has been willing to be the first to pull that trigger, probably because they're terrified of opening a Pandora's box. So we're stuck in this global staring contest. Okay, so if the old rulebook is basically useless, what do we do? Well, the most logical next step seems to be writing a new one, a rulebook built from the ground up specifically for this crazy digital age. And you have to remember what the internet actually is. It's not something one country can own or control. It's a global web that connects all of us, crossing every border imaginable. That means no single nation, no matter how powerful, can defend it alone. It's just impossible. So working together isn't just a nice idea, it is the only option. So what would a new treaty actually do? Well, it boils down to two really big things. First, and this is the most important part, everyone would finally agree on the definitions. We'd have a clear, written rule that says this is a cyber attack, and this is when it becomes an act of war. And second, it would create a real playbook for how countries can work together to find the attackers and bring them to justice. And the payoff for doing this would be huge. You'd finally get that legal clarity that governments and companies are desperate for. You'd get a standard way to respond so you don't have one country overreacting while another does nothing. And crucially, we could finally start to deal with those massive attacks that cause billions in economic damage, but don't quite fit our old ideas about war. So let's tie all of this together. Why should any of us care about some debate over legal definitions and treaties? Well, because this is about way more than what happens in a courtroom. Here's the bottom line. We need clear rules of the road for cyberspace. Without them, it's the Wild West. When the line between crime, spying, and an act of war is this blurry, the risk of a catastrophic miscalculation, a misunderstanding that spirals into a real-world physical conflict, is just dangerously high. This is about keeping our world from falling apart. And so that's the monumental challenge we're all left with. How in the world do you write a rulebook for a war zone that has no borders, no uniforms, and no clear lines? It's one of the defining questions of our time. And finding the answer, well, that's going to shape the world for all of us.